Hey, what's up, everybody? We just wrapped up a podcast here with Mr. Ryan Muckenhirn, all about the 6.5 revolution. We see 6.5s all over the place and many different varieties of many different names. And this little bullet right here, or ones very similar to it, have caused quite an uproar. Good one, and in our industry, we would say. So we discussed all kinds of things as to where this bullet came from, sort of the etymology, if you will, all the different cartridges that come in 6.5, as well as some bullet performance characteristics in hunting scenarios as well. That one was one that really blew my mind, and pretty interesting stuff.
Basically the who, what, where, when, how of the 6.5, a little bit of history. Is it as new as maybe we think it is? Maybe not.
Check it out. You did good, Ryan, holding that bullet there.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
All right, what is up, everybody? Got Jimmy to my right and our in-house encyclopedia, Ryan Muckenhirn, across the table from us. I'm a little hot right now, just physically. I've got a nice quarter-zip sweatshirt on. Underneath it, I've got a Hollister T-shirt, which I love the shade of gray, but I can't take my sweatshirt off because it will reveal that I'm wearing a Hollister T-shirt, which by now all of you guys know. Just a little embarrassing. Nothing against Hollister. I'm just not 7. So.
Also wearing a set of nice denim jeans, some gray Sauconys, socks.
I'm just setting the stage.
You are, yeah.
The world needed to know that I'm
Everybody knows
physically
now.
hot, a little bit sweaty.
We got to pay extra attention to those folks out there who don't watch on YouTube. They got to know exactly what this room looks like. We're sitting in front of a rich wood of sorts tabletop. Anyway, carry on.
A few dents where Jim's done some manual reloading.
Yep. I always rub my finger right across that before every podcast.
So,
it's episode 101, though, Mark. We're kind of having some, like a sentimental moment.
I know. We eclipsed that 100 mark. Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm completely off the Monster. That was a terrible idea. It's like drugs.
That's all right.
Nothing against Monster, too.
Glad to have you back,
Everybody
Mark.
drinks them successfully but me.
Glad to have you back.
Topic of today's discussion. Not my body temperature, not your drink of choice. We're talking today about a little thing that I like to call the 6.5 revolution, Jim.
Yes. Now,
it seems in today's day and age of modern cartridges, we have a lot of 6.5 options. We've got the 6.5 Creedmoor, which I almost feel like, even though it's somewhat newer, it's kind of like this baseline. And then 10,000.
It became a baseline quite quickly.
It became this baseline quite quickly.
It didn't. I don't know. We can go into the history of that.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But we have actually 6.5 options that came
well ahead of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And some after. And to make sense of this, like I said.
I see you have a list of all the 6.5s in front.
Oh, and it's probably not even all of them.
No, that's fine. But can you just list what you got here for some examples?
Okay, yeah. And by the way, so I was trying to do some research beforehand so I could talk at least a little bit smart.
Yeah.
All I succeeded in doing was confusing myself and really not being able to define a lot of the... I mean, there's differences. You can see differences, but trying to make a choice, not that easy. So we got the 6.5 Creedmoor, of course, the 6.5 284, the 6.5 284 Norma, which might just be the 6.5 284, the 6.5 300, the 6.5 RPM, the 6.5 Short Action Ultra Meg, or the 6.5 SOM, the 6.5 PRC, the 260 Remington, which I guess isn't a 6.5, but it's kind of a 6.5, the 6.5 06, the 6.5 Gap, and the 26 Nosler, which seems kind of like a 6.5.
Well, and then there's that Weatherby 6.5 RPM or something, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. 6.5. Did you say PRC? We have a reloading kit for that dies.
I think I mentioned I think I mentioned the PRC and the RPM.
Yes, you did.
If I didn't, I was remiss in doing so.
I got distracted for a second. Ryan was pointing
Too
at
many
something.
6.5s.
So many 6.5s. Ryan, what's happening?
Well, so I was pointing at the Hornady reloading manual. In this version here, this is their 10th. You start going through that at the 6.5 page. It's a very large chunk of the book. And
is it?
Yeah, oh yeah. It goes, I mean, all the way back to like 6.5 BR, 6.5 Carcano, 6.5 Japanese. I mean, it just keeps going.
6.5 Swedish?
Yep.
6.5 Swede? Yeah, I didn't have that on there.
Is there a 6.5 for every country and nationality in the planet?
Very popular bullet diameter. Very recently American. Well, sort of. The 264 Win Mag Goes back a long time. So there's that.
I've never heard of that one before.
Yep, that's a cool cartridge.
But it goes back a long time, but was it ever like a mainstay?
Oh, 264 Win Mag? Absolutely was.
It was,
Yep,
okay.
Yep. So pre-64 Model 70s, what do they call those? The Westerners was the version chambered in that. And so like along today's modern rifle lines, they built it for the Western hunter. Longer barrel, designed to run optics of the time that were high stepping.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, by modern standards, though, if you look at the cartridge, it's nothing magical.
So what are there's some other regions of the world where 6.5, well, I guess the 6.5 Swede.
Yep.
Right. Is that like
Huge
their version of the .6 or something?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Interesting.
In that country, that would be like their
Nordic
their
nations. Nordic nations, especially, the 6.5s are very popular.
Now, is there something special about the diameter of 6.5? Because, like, when you look at, I mean, we've talked to the guys at Hornady before, and they'll say, when you add weight to a bullet, which I know some people, talk about adding weight to a bullet to make it more stable through the air or something like that, you add length.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's diameter of the bullet, which is, I'd imagine, going to add or subtract some weight, but that's not necessarily the way of adding weight.
Right.
It's also how how do they even decide?
I think what is really magical about the projectile, its length relative to its weight, relative to its diameter, like all encompassing. From a hunter's perspective, you end up with a bullet that has what's called a very high sectional density, so it penetrates well for its weight, for its length, for its speed. And then,
what does high sectional density mean?
So the higher the figure, the more, and somebody who's listening that has a much better understanding of the determination of sectional density is its cross section relative to its weight.
Okay.
Yeah. So the higher that value, the better it penetrates.
So if you were shooting something that was like made out of some unobtainium that was very heavy, but it was smaller than this, it would have a lower sectional.
Yeah. So like if you had a wider, shorter bullet.
Yeah.
And the scales, right? So if we're looking at a 140 grain 6.5 bullet versus a 140 grain 7mm bullet versus a 140 grain 30 caliber bullet, which are like the progression through the diameters going up in caliber, we have a lower sectional density the higher we go. In caliber, right?
Because the bullet is getting wider but shorter.
Correct.
Okay.
Or not longer necessarily. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when we start goofing around with different alloys, that kind of throws things a bit because you can have longer bullets out of different alloys that have the same weight. And so somebody who's more intelligent than I am when it comes to that kind of things could weigh in on that. Like if a longer bullet is made out of a lighter alloy, but it has the length, what are we doing there? We're not changing the SD because of the weight itself, but there's some other properties there. For the competition shooter anyways, the bullet is slippery or fast-looking in design, so we have high BC, and that's why they're very popular.
Now, are all 6.5 bullets high BC?
Not necessarily, no. Because if you look at like a 6.5 bench rest, most of the time the guys that I know that shot BR cartridges, whether it was 6.5 PPC or 6.5 BR, they shot flat base bullets and not really heavyweight flat base bullets. It was just a really mild and accurate cartridge and bullet diameter, and so that was why they were kind of mainstream for a little bit.
But you just said accurate, but they didn't have high BC.
You don't necessarily need a high BC to be accurate. And a lot of the bench rest competitions.
Get this guy out of here.
Right.
I was going to say, what kind of ranges are we talking?
We got the wrong guest.
So a lot of those BR.
Knows nothing.
Yeah, we got to hit the red button. He just dropped. The 4 drops out. He goes into a pool of sharks.
With lasers.
Yeah.
No. So some of those BR competitions were like 100, 200, and 300 yards.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
and so
okay.
a flat base was appropriate. And in some cases, you get better accuracy out of a flat base or the potential.
Now, is that just because the bullet is seated better in the case or something that's more consistent? Or
A gentleman told me once that shot those is that and this, again, fact check, the boat tail design can allow the bullet to yaw and can't upon firing.
Okay.
Because there's going to be parts of the bullet that are not its base that are being influenced by the pressures upon ignition. Whereas a flat base, being flat in the back, the full contact of force and pressure rearward is consistent and even on the base of the bullet, increasing its inherent accuracy.
Okay, I'm following.
Stretch this out over distance, though, and then start putting wind influence on there. The slipperier design of a boat tail is going to improve that.
Yeah. Okay.
Gotcha.
It reminds me of like when you try backing up and reversing a trailer. You're pushing against a tiny little hitch, even though the trailer is quite wide. So any little forces you enact upon it side to side can make it go over to the side. Whereas if you were just backing into someone's house and your rear bumper was just straight up against the side of their house, it's just you just right in.
If my father's listening,
we were talking about the killdozer right before this, so I'm in my head I'm thinking of destruction.
I still can't back a trailer up.
It's hard.
I'm not good at it.
It is.
Right to go left, left to go right.
Jim, you are expert status, by the way. I've seen you do some pretty impressive stuff.
It's just because Dad handed me the keys in the neighborhood with the old U-Haul once and just told me, get it down the driveway. I'll see you in 2 hours.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
It's probably the only way to do it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
6.5. Wow. We've already, okay. Somehow we started talking about sectional densities and wait, what you see? Did you refer to that as SD? But that's not standard.
Not standard deviation.
Okay.
Also an SD.
Also an SD.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, here's the deal. With a lot of cartridges nowadays, it seems like, and I'm probably paraphrasing here, cartridge development. We need a new cartridge, pour some 6.5 on it. That's what it kind of feels like.
Yeah, or pour some Creedmoor on it.
Which actually, I own 2 6.5 Creedmoors. I love them. I think it's an excellent cartridge. I like these high BC, long, super sexy 6.5 bullets.
Yeah.
But there's so many of them.
Yeah, why? If I were to look at 6.5 Creedmoor in front of us, right? I look at a 6.5 Creedmoor. If you were to show me the 6.5 PRC right now, I know we have the reloading dies for it in front of us, but not the actual cartridge. What would the difference be?
Size. So the PRC is a much larger cartridge by it's volumetric capacity.
Are we talking mostly about the case or the actual bullet?
No, bullet's the same. So 140, 143, 147.
And it is the same bullet.
Same projectile. Yep.
We're just changing the case
Larger
behind
case.
it.
Yep.
Now, when you change, is there a number when somebody says 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, 270, 220 Swift, whatever? That's all talking about the bullet, correct? There's no way to know exactly what case is being...
Well, sometimes, depending on the designation. A lot of metric cartridges that have the remainder of the designation listed. Like, let's take, for example, 6.5 by 55 Swedish Mauser. Okay. 6.5 would denote the bullet diameter. 55 would denote the case length in millimeters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fun fact there. So, but anyway... As you change the case, then, is the thing that you're doing the most of changing just how much powder you can put behind it to then just shove it out the barrel faster or maybe slower?
Correct.
Is that it?
Yeah. Yep.
So, like, what is the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 6.5 PRC case? Is it longer? Is it wider?
Both.
It's both.
Yep.
Is it more or less accurate than the 6.5 Creedmoor?
I think that and this is going to spark a lot of arguments. People talk about cartridges that are inherently accurate by design.
Okay.
If you have a really good rifle, you might get a cartridge that's, easier to load and mild-mannered, and that is going to lend itself to some accuracy, or a cartridge or a case that's easier to tune. But you can have a rifle in a cartridge that's, quote, not inherently accurate, shoot phenomenally well. If everything goes right. I think the thing with the PRC is that you're adding hundreds of feet per second of velocity in a similar action length without going astronomical on the recoil scale. It's a hyper-accurate cartridge. It's named PRC, Precision Rifle Cartridge. Yeah. So it's designed to do the very same thing the Creedmoor was with more juice.
But just
faster.
Turn it up to 11.
Yep.
And it's about, what, 200?
250? On the chrono, with the testing that I've done, it's a 147 at about 2950. So this is a 140 at about 2710, 2720.
In the Creedmoor.
Yeah. Yep.
All these different 6.5 bullets, 6.5 gap, 6.5 .6, 6.5 RPM, 6.5 300, all those. They're all just the same bullet in a different case.
Yep.
I feel like, what am I trying to say at this point? How? Why would you change the case size? Or why would you change the case
application,
round? I think that's where,
right? So here's a good for instance. My hunting partner and I talked about this a lot. Like, what is the ideal cartridge for a particular thing? And he started shooting 6.5 Creedmoor on game many years ago. His first rifle, if I can recollect this, was a Cooper, a custom Cooper out of a gun shop in South Dakota. It was an edition gun called the Jackson Excalibur. And he had that chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor.
Is this the same guy who used to shoot 25-06?
Yep.
Okay.
Very accurate rifle, very mild-mannered to shoot. But when you look at the numbers on a 6.5 Creedmoor, like if you're somebody who looks at foot-pounds of energy and velocity is the important thing in the factor, it's not a wildly powerful cartridge by some standards.
No.
And that's a whole nother topic of discussion, one that we can tie into some of these other cartridges here. But he wanted a little bit more. He wanted a particular velocity threshold to be met with a particular weight of bullet or a particular style of bullet to take a certain group of game animals. And so he built himself a 6.5-06 Ackley, which if you were to add a number of millimeters to the case length of this, well, literally take this bullet and very similar shoulder profile and put it in a 30-06 case. He, on his chronograph with 143 grain Hornady ELDXs, was getting about 3150, and he's got a pretty middle of the road load, so he's got some room to go on this. So we're taking a bullet that the box posted velocity is 2,710 feet per second on the factory loaded Hornady stuff, and he's adding 400 feet per second to it.
Yeah.
Significant.
Yes, and that is significant.
That is over a football field in a second.
Yes, and he's going in not that much larger of a case. I don't have his load data, but it's moving. It's a very impressive cartridge. I will be adding one to my list pretty shortly.
So when people say they want to reach a certain velocity threshold, why do they want to reach that exact? How does one determine what velocity threshold you even want to be in?
Well, I mean, so a lot of personal interpretation of this, but if you wanted to flatten the trajectory of your cartridge, you can do it by increasing the BC, the velocity, or both.
Right.
And then we end up with a flatter shooting gun. And then if you wanted to push a particular weight of bullet because a particular style of bullet was available in that weight class at a particular velocity to make a certain trajectory, you have to do it by increasing velocity. And so he got all he could out of the Creedmoor, and he thinks it's a great cartridge. I think I've been with him and present on no less than probably a dozen big game kills with the 6.5 Creedmoor. Some of them at extraordinary ranges, some of them, at very reasonable ranges. He just wanted a little more, and we're tinkerers, so we goof around with it. And the 6.5-06 was the next step, without going to a different bolt face, like a Magnum bolt face, or a very large action.
Would he have stuck with the 6.5 still? Had he gone to this Magnum bolt face in different action?
Yeah, we talked about it. Talked about doing like a 6.5 short action Ultra Mag or a 6.5 Wisdom, which is a thing.
Whoa.
Yep.
It's something I didn't even know
And that's
about.
where you would need to change to a Magnum bolt face?
Yep. So,
and a long action?
No, so those two specifically would stay in a shorter action.
Okay.
But the case, the 30-06 case, had already been 6.5'd long time ago. And in quite a few iterations too. So there's like the 6.5-06 A square, then there's the 6.5 Gibbs, which are all based roughly on that case. So the 6.5-06, of course, and then the Gibbs is a little bit different shoulder, a little bit different neck length, but parent case, right? So knowing what we could get out of that case, or theoretically what we could get out of that case, that's where he made that choice on. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to talk about every single 6.5 on here, but I just know that we'd be sitting here forever, and we'd just be
well, and
talking
that was
about
one of my thoughts too. Just go down the
6.5s.
list and try and sort them all out. But let me pick two that, at least in my head, seem like they might be somewhat similar. And one, the 6.5 Psalm versus the 6.5 WSM. Which I didn't even know there was a WSM version of the 6.5.
Oh, no. They've ruined it.
Or made it better.
Just like everybody says, oh, you just take a cartridge and Creedmoor and you get it better.
You know what they call
like,
it? 6.5 Leopard.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Sounds
6.5
hot.
Leopard?
Sounds hot.
Sounds like something that the bad guy in a James Bond movie would use.
So, is this a commercially available cartridge?
No.
Okay.
No, but very popular.
Okay.
Yeah, also called the Sherman Short Mag.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe let's not talk about that one because I think.
But
Let's talk about commercially available stuff.
Yeah, commercially available stuff. If you were to look at this list, how come that? What's it with the 26 Nosler? The Nosler cartridges confuse me because you got 28 Nosler, 26. Now, what do those numbers refer to?
So 26 is the common bullet, or the abbreviated bullet diameter. So 2.264 would be a 6.5, right?
So it's like the 260, but they just took the zero off.
Yep. So
Kind of
now,
like the F-150. They
Yep.
took the 1500. They made it 150. Okay.
so Nosler's approach to this is pretty slick. So 26, we know it's a 6.5. 28, we know it's a 7. 30, we know it's a 30. 33, we know it's a 338. They don't have a 375 Nosler. So they don't have anything in that heavyweight class, or medium bore class, I should say. But yeah, so the 26 Nosler is a good example because that's like a hypervelocity cartridge. We've gone to a full, like almost as big a diameter a case as you can get in like a commercially available or standard action. Not super long necessarily, but it's a big case. Hyper velocity. We're pushing that same bullet at hundreds and hundreds of feet per second faster now than the 6.5 Creedmoor. And then on the other end of that scale, the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's a good, I think, baseline to start with because everybody has one nowadays, it seems.
Yeah.
So in going with the 26 Nosler, with this very big case, very voluminous case, you are able to flatten out your trajectory tremendously. Now, we haven't had a 26 in here yet. Mark had a 28 in here, and we ran the numbers on it, and it is flat.
It is flat.
It is 6 mils to a grand.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What?
It's a laser.
With a 178?
175 grain.
175?
1G, it's 6 mils of drop.
Yeah. And the
Holy crap. The Creedmoor that I was shooting at a grand was like
10 and a half.
10. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's flat. And so that's the thing,
Wow,
right?
I feel like that just opened my eyes
Yeah.
to what people are talking about when they talk about flattening a trajectory.
Yep.
Because I'm not, so like to put it into perspective for people who aren't dialing turrets a lot, let's talk about 6 mils of adjustment versus 10 and a half, right? So I was shooting the Diamondback Tactical First Focal Plane, a scope I mentioned a lot on here, at the Vortex Extreme. 5 mils of adjustment per rotation of the turret. I had a total of 2 mils of adjustment. I'm sorry, not 2 mils. That's not right. 2 rotations, 2 full rotations I had after I was zeroed. So when I wanted to go out to a grand, I was maxed on my available adjustment. So that was it. I had run out. And then I could use my reticle from there to help me the rest of the way, but it's never ideal. If I was shooting that cartridge, the 28 Nosler you're talking about, I'd have been able to go 1 full rev and then another mil and still have 4 mils of adjustment left over. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so that's why you do it. You bump that case size up and you get into a whole different animal,
Yeah.
right?
What would that case be like similar to? Maybe like a more common cartridge that a person go like, oh, I know what that looks like.
Lengthen a WISM considerably.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So very similar diameter to that case.
Fat.
But fairly long. But not so long as like a 300 rum case. Like you hunted moose with a 300 rum.
Mm-hmm.
So shorten that case up a little bit.
Okay.
But longer than your WISM. It's a big
Okay.
case. When you hold it in your hand, well, the 28 Nosler, just neck that down 0.5 millimeter.
So then how would that differ then, I guess, going back to the 6.5 SOM, which is kind of like a short, fat.
Yep. So the SOM is a little bit narrower than the WISM and a little bit shorter.
Is there a significant difference in cartridges between when you fatten the case to get more powder in it versus lengthening the case to get more powder in it?
Depending on which ballistician or reloader you're talking to, yeah. There's a balance there. They
Okay.
a lot of folks feel the short fat cases are very efficient and you can accomplish
Like it burns all at once, so to speak, rather than burning up the length
long
of
column.
a long case.
Yep, correct. So like when we start running numbers on 300 Win Mag, which is a cartridge I own and load for, versus 300 WISM, which is a cartridge I've owned and loaded for, I was really able to match what I could do in my Win Mag out of my Wisdom with less powder. Yeah, but there's some other stuff going on there too, and it depends. If I went to a heavyweight bullet in my Wisdom, I would start to neuter it, whereas the Win Mag would pull away. So there's give and take. So another point.
Because there's just less room to seat that cartridge.
Correct. Before we start getting into issues where we're interfering with mag length. So if we're feeding through a box-fed magazine, I wouldn't be able to do a 190 grain projectile or a 200 grain projectile out of my Wisdom and have the same performance that I would say out of my Win Mag, because I can just seat the bullet out longer on my Win Mag. Then again, I don't run box mags. So yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of like stepping stones that you got to toe around when you're deciding how to build a cartridge and make it either efficient or make it a powerhouse or, that kind of thing. Length and width is certainly one of them. So
I just feel there's so many parallels to like
tremendous amount
tuning engines.
Yeah.
It's like, do you bore it? Do you stroke it? Do you change the cam? Do you
Yep.
That's wild.
Yep.
But I think the bottom line with a lot of this stuff is like taking the 6.5 Creed, I guess, as like maybe like a modern day baseline of the 6.5s and getting something that is kind of bigger, hotter, faster with the same bullet. And I guess using that bullet as a baseline as well for what it offers, as far as I'd say in general, not always, but you can get these, high sectional density, high BC bullets that perform very efficiently at longer ranges.
Outside of your expectation for that caliber, like that small of a caliber. Right.
It's why this is complete theorization, or maybe everybody knows why. Why do you think, even though the 6.5 Creedmoor isn't the oldest by any means of the bunch, how has it become such a standard of the 6.5s?
Here's my theory. And I think it's a great cartridge, and I own several of them, and I've taken game animals with them. I think that our friends at Hornady did a very good job with this cartridge in doing a few things. One, making it very pleasant to shoot. It's not a high recoiling cartridge.
Are there any 6.5s that are high recoiling? Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So like some 6.5s will buck you pretty good.
Absolutely.
Is it some of the ones with the bigger cases, lots of powder, and even though they're pushing that same bullet, it just still...
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
So that's one of them. So it's a very pleasant cartridge to shoot. Or mild, whatever you want to call it. Number two, they made it extremely affordable. When it came out, it was 2007. The first rifle I ever saw chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor was a TC Icon Weather Shield, which was a really cool gun, and there was very few of them. And people dismissed the cartridge immediately. One, because it wasn't a 30-06 or a 7 Rem Mag, and then two, because they said that this super proprietary ammo will never be able to be found on shelves. That stigma held and still holds to this day. I chat with folks.
Personal computers.
Yeah.
Will never work.
I chat with folks on the phone all the time that say, I didn't go with the 6.5, I went with the 308 because you can find 308 everywhere, but you can't find 6.5 anywhere. And I wholeheartedly disagree with the statement. You can buy 6.5 Creedmoor ammo pretty much everywhere now. And aside from availability, affordability, go ahead and price this out at your favorite retailer for 6.5 ammo. And we've got a box of the 140 grain ELD ammo here, which is what we use for testing at the shop.
We shoot it at matches all the time.
Look at the cost of this ammo on the retailer shelf versus the cost of the same loading in 308, the 170 or 168 or 178 grain ELD match. That is dollars cheaper. And so for a shooter who wants to go out to the range and become very familiar with their rifle, there's a few things that they have to take into consideration. How long can I shoot it before I cry uncle on the recoil scale? And how long can I shoot it until I cry uncle on the wallet? And with the 6.5, you can do it a lot more than the 308. And then they were very clever in talking about these attributes to the cartridge and releasing it. That, I think, bolstered its popularity. That, and of course, it's an extraordinary cartridge. It really is a darn good cartridge. It shoots very well. It's hyper accurate. And the rifles that it's chambered in can do wonderful things when you're hunting with it or when you're target shooting with it.
What I'd say when you talk about hunting too, at probably the ranges most people are hunting, and I guess I'll speak to maybe deer-sized game or even elk, I'd say out to 400 or something
Yep.
like that. It's going to work pretty darn good. It's going to work great. I'd say speculation. I probably fall into this mental camp of like, oh man, when I step it up to elk, like I need a bigger cartridge. Whether that is true or not, I think it might be a little bit in my head. But going back to the popularity of this cartridge, I've somewhat wondered, Ryan, if it's a cartridge that Hornady did a fantastic job with. It was adopted by the long-range community. Overnight. So it kind of garnered, I guess, some street credit there.
Very quickly.
And I feel like it's a cartridge of kind of like this size with the sorts of numbers that are attached to it and the fact that it's a mild recoiling cartridge, but it didn't attack the ego. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like ego of what?
Of the person, I'll say even some crowds that I ran with, I bought a 243. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to hunt deer with this 243. They're like, oh, yeah, kid's cartridge. Neat.
Right.
And I feel like the 6.5, people are like, oh, yeah, 6.5 Creed. Yeah, great. No, that's a good choice. Like the same group of people that would said like, oh, that's a kid's cartridge or,
that same group
to avoid
of
a little recoil.
Yeah, quit
Right.
being...
Which we all know Mark isn't because he's been shooting a 300 Wisdom forever.
Of course, I've been shooting a lot of 6.5 Creed, and when I jump back to that gun...
I'll say this. I've seen Mark shoot some pretty high buck and stuff. It doesn't really faze him. It's pretty... I flinch. I shoot his 300 Wisdom. I'm like, damn, that thing hurts. He shoots it, nice tight little group. I'm like, man.
It's not pleasant, though.
He's got that
I don't enjoy
strength.
it.
He's got that dad strength.
No,
Dad
it's
strength.
not that.
No, it's the truth. I think it is.
But he's very right, though.
I didn't probably do a good job of explaining it. But
I know where you're going. And the ego thing's kind of a real deal. Because now I have people say the same thing about 308. They're like, what do you hunt with? I'm like, oh, I hunt with 308 a lot. They're like, oh, boy, 308.
What, like it's inadequate?
Anemic. And they say the same thing about an 06, too.
Yeah, that one baffles me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Is it more so when they're saying that it's not so much like, oh man, you pansy. It's more just kind of like it's
Where
like,
do you-
oh, you're using that period cartridge.
Yeah, where do you put the ramrod? Yeah, so I think part of that. I mean, there's a lot of stigma surrounding cartridges, and the 6.5 is gotten popular. The Creedmoor. Speaking of the Creedmoor.
I mean, if you can get your flint to spark, that 308 will go every time.
Yeah.
I think
heaven forbid you're out in the rain.
or having to shoot beyond 40 meters. I think that the Creedmoor did a good job of avoiding those pitfalls, whether it be by affordability or clever marketing or both. It also fills an interesting void that I think was kind of left open by some other cartridges. And
Yeah. Well, okay, I guess on the one, if you look on either end of it, and I don't want to start making this a 7mm podcast by any means, but I've seen people talk about, you talk about the 243. We did a 10-minute talk on that, and the 6 Creedmoor. A lot of people like shooting the 6 Creedmoor and precision rifle and stuff like that. It's light recoiling. You can get good accuracy out of it. But then there's the question of certain types of game. Maybe, of course, I'm sure anybody could probably kill anything with any cartridge. You can kill a deer with a rock if you try hard enough. But, there is the question of is it potent enough? Then you go up to the 6.5, and people don't have that question as much. Maybe when you get into the really, really big stuff, that question starts to come back in. But then if you go up to the 7mm, are you in significantly higher recoiling, not as pleasant to shoot territory?
Potentially, yeah.
So the 6.5 Creedmoor is the nice balance between the two.
Yep.
Or I'm sorry, the 6.5 just in general. I keep saying Creedmoor because it just naturally comes
You
out.
make a interesting statement there in the perception of potency or adequacy for game applications. And I think actually its availability and shootability is somewhat of a double-edged sword, because I think some people have learned to shoot this cartridge very well.
Yeah.
And having the ability to shoot a cartridge well, I think makes you inherently a more ethical hunter. Right. Well, taking out of the conversation a couple of other things, right? But being able to shoot your equipment and shoot your rifle well and learn your optics makes you more lethal.
Yeah.
And I think that if you have a shooter who's comfortable with their rig, regardless of caliber, they can probably do some pretty fascinating things with it. The other side of that coin is that I think it has instilled a little bit of I guess some false
Overconfidence.
confidence. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say like I'd never take game animals with a 270 past 400 yards. What do you shoot, sir or ma'am? 6.5 Creedmoor. Well, that is silly because if we look at the numbers,
It's the
Right.
same thing, isn't
Jack
it?
O'Connor's 270 is eating your lunch. And now with some of the modern loadings, eating your lunch well past what you thought your lunch was available at. So I think it does install a little bit of like a false confidence in the cartridge.
Well,
but
somehow it's got this a little bit of a reputation like it's made of magic.
Yeah,
like it's
like a
loaded
hammer
with
of Thor.
ground up
Like a
unicorn
unicorn
horns.
card. Yeah, exactly.
and I think, if you keep everything in check, you'll be all right. It's a good cartridge. I think it's a fine cartridge. I think it's a good deer and antelope cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
Shot a deer with it 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Worked fabulously.
What is the difference between this and the 260?
I used its long range capabilities at 81 yards.
Well done, sir.
So that's a really excellent question.
When I hear 260, I think Utah.
The 260,
You might as well call it the 260 Utah.
the 260 is a really good
Am I wrong?
cartridge.
It's popular.
It was my first 6.5, and I was enamored with it on paper.
They screwed it up when they first
They
developed
kind
it, right?
of did, yeah, kind of.
Twisted the barrels wrong.
That was part of it.
Okay.
And then there's the optimization of case capacity and bullet weight and length. And that's where the Creedmoor really pulled ahead. So 10 years after the commercialization of the 260, which was 97, the Creedmoor was released. And if you look at the two side by side, they're very similar, like from a structural standpoint and then on paper.
Is the 260 a modified 308 case?
It is just straight neck down. So
And the 6.5 Creed is
modified 30 TC.
Which is also what the 308 is based
No,
on.
the 30 TC is a little bit older than that. The 30 TC is a brand new case altogether. It shares the same bolt face, but it has a different web and extractor groove well, I shouldn't say web, but extractor groove profile, length, shape, shoulder profile, body taper angle, and neck length.
Okay.
And really, I look at the 30 TC as somewhat of a modernized, like if you were to look at the 308 and be like, okay, we need to take this airframe, trim some weight out of it so it can fly higher and faster, you would come up with a 30 TC.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. So it does everything the 308 did in a slightly smaller package. Well, one of the guys over at Hornady, Dave Emery, slapped a little bushing on there and knocked that thing down to 6.5 and plugged in a 140 grain bullet, and voila, we have the 6.5 Creedmoor. What it does over the 260, if anything, is allow you to seat your bullets out longer without getting excessively longer on cartridge overall length.
Okay.
So we now are able to feed it in box magazines designed around the 308 Winchester, where the 260, if we were to take the same bullet and seed it out at the length required to get the right amount of powder in there to reach that velocity that we're looking for, we may exceed those mag lengths.
Okay.
And if you're not shooting out of box mag, it doesn't really matter.
Right, depending on your gun.
Okay.
But that was really the sauce, is we made a more efficient case design that allowed us to utilize that bullet weight and profile without goofing up how it's going to interact with our magazines, feeding, and that kind of thing. Because the 260, if you hot rod the 260, it's going to eat this thing's lunch too.
Yeah.
It should. It's got larger case capacity, but there's a couple of caveats that come along with it, like what's your cartridge overall length? Well, depending on your gun, it doesn't matter. If you have the right rifle that can accept a COAL that's a little bit longer, your 260 is going to be your superior ballistic cartridge.
Yeah.
COAL.
Cartridge overall length.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
And that is the same thing with the 243V 6 Creedmoor. The 6 Creedmoor is an improved case design that allows you to shoot those heavyweight 6mm bullets that are very long and start eating into your case capacity.
Yeah.
And then lowering your velocity with a more efficient case design.
Is it always the case that the cartridges that have the 308, 270, 243, whatever designations, what is that, standard imperial or whatever?
Standard.
Versus metric. Is it always the case that the standard ones are a little bit of the more antiquated one, and the metric ones are always the little bit?
Today maybe.
That's what it seems like.
Today,
it seems like
but
every time I hear somebody mention a cartridge that's written out in metric terms, it's like slightly more efficient than the similar version that's in standard imperial.
It's kind of like a British accent, Jim. It just kind of makes stuff better.
If we would have had this conversation 10 years ago, that would be remarkably different, because the only metrics that had been successful in the U.S. to any real degree were the 7s.
The 7s, yep.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, for whatever reason, growing up, right? You know, my first 2 deer guns, both 30-06s, because they're 30-06s. Yeah. People would be like, oh, I've got a 7mm. I'd be like, that just don't sound right. Loser. I don't like it.
But that was the only one that was really something.
I don't speak Italian.
Right. Listen here, Frenchie.
But if you look at the 264 Win Mag v the 7mm Rem Mag, which were introduced very close to each other.
Okay.
They're very similar in performance, and I mean, depending on what camp you're in, you could give the nod and advantage to either one. The 7 swept the 264, put it in the dirt, and it fell into obscurity very quickly. And the 7 continued on.
So weird.
It is. But the pendulum swings, right?
Yeah.
So I've been into, quote, long range shooting seriously now for about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years. Prior to that, I dabbled. And I can remember when, like, your 308 Winchester was your baseline.
Right.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then the pendulum swung, and then people are like, you got to go to a 338 for long range. And this was in my ignorance and understanding that, well, okay, if you go with a 338, you're going to have a huge rifle. It's going to weigh a lot. It's going to have a completely different recoil characteristic, blah, 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 blah. The pendulum swung back, and then people are like, no, it's a 7. And then now the pendulum swings, and now it's a 6.5. So I believe that it will go somewhere else. Berger is producing 270 bullets that are high weight, like 156.
Okay.
And it's a 270. And like when folks would think 270, they think you're shooting a tuna can out of a case, because they think, it's terribly inefficient.
Right.
That bullet's profile is exceptional. Look at that BC, look at that SD. That's an amazing projectile. Blackjack, we talked about their 131 grain ace bullet in the last podcast, which is a 25 caliber bullet.
Oh yeah.
Hyper BC. Excellent characteristics for that. Maybe it's the 25. Maybe that's where the pendulum swings next. For now, it's definitely 6.5.
Why does the pendulum swing? Because people just get bored.
Yep, I think so. I really do.
I think we're always looking for a better mousetrap.
100%.
You know, and like I said,
which is why civilization advances. I mean, you do get advancements out of that, but sometimes I think you just get sort of like reasons to just buy new stuff out of that too.
Right.
Well, and maybe this is an example of it. Maybe it's not. When I was kind of looking at a couple things, like I don't know a whole lot about the 6.5 284, right? But then
that's an old cartridge.
I was looking at some stuff on paper, and I was like, it's not wildly. It didn't appear to be wildly different than a 6.5 Creedmoor, and I'm like, well, if was around.
Weird action length. So an intermediate action length, not a short, not a long, intermediate.
Okay.
Or if you shoot a Remington 700, it's a long.
Okay.
Interesting body diameter, because it's a little chubbier than a 30-06, but the rim is rebated to fit a 30-06 or a 473 bolt face. So it's kind of a weird cartridge.
Okay.
Like for its time, when you looked at it, well, even the 284, so backing up before, it was a 6.5 284, it was just a 284. If you look at the guns that the 284 was developed around, like the Winchester Model 100, and you're like, that cartridge is space age. That rifle is, for some people. I think the 100 is kind of a cool gun, but or the Savage 99. It's a high performance cartridge, but it was in a weird rifle platform. Well, bolt gun shooters were like, hey, we can
peculiar one.
We can make something out of this, and they necked it down to 6.5, and it worked. 140 grain bullet at 3,000 feet per second. That was the magic swing. And 3,000 is pretty optimistic for its time. Maybe it was 100 or 2 feet per second slower than that. But at the time, that was a really darn good case to do that on. That won countless titles and accounted for hundreds of head of game at long range. And for at least when I was kind of becoming very fascinated with hand loading and ballistics and things like that, was the very high performance, interesting cartridge, the 6.5 284. And now it's kind of like taking a back burner because there was a better way to do it. And for what you're getting out of a 6.5 284, or what you can get reasonably, it's maybe not worth it. I don't know. It's really up to the shooter. I mean, I hear people say that a particular cartridge isn't a good idea for a number of reasons, but I think it's a fine cartridge. There's better mousetraps. They are more efficient. They are smaller. They are lighter recoiling. Their brass is more attainable. These kinds of things. Or you can buy factory ammo. And for a lot of shooters, that's a huge thing. You can go down to your local sporting goods store and you can pick this box ammo up for $25. You can't do that with 6.5 284. Ergo, the 6.5 Creedmoor reigns king.
Yeah. Do you think, like, for a beginning shooter, that it makes sense to go out and get, at this point in time, a 6.5 Creedmoor versus, say, a 308 or something like that? Because now here's one of those the personal computer will never work kind of questions almost. The 6.5 Creedmoor is obviously very popular, very hot now. It seems to me like it has broken past the it's almost on a runner's high, to the point where it's gotten so hot and so popular that I feel it has almost been inducted into the Hall of Fame, as it will probably be a very timeless cartridge.
I agree.
Like the 308.
You'll see military adoption of it, which is going to help.
Military adoption, that'll help a lot actually too, yeah. Which is probably part of the reason why the 308 has stayed around so long, and the 5.56 has stayed around so long, So it's kind of at that point. What do you think are some of those timeless cartridges? Maybe I even just mentioned all of them, but
those are good ones.
308, 6.5 Creedmoor. Are there any other ones?
7 Rem Mag, 338 Win Mag, 300 Win Mag, 270. I think all of those are well placed. And there's some that probably should be that aren't, that were great cartridges, like the straight 284 Winchester, just the standard version of it. Excellent cartridge. Very, very, very great cartridge. 280 Remington fell on its face. It was reintroduced twice.
You just built a 280, didn't you?
280 AI, yeah.
280, okay.
Yep, which is now gaining popularity at an alarming rate.
And what is the difference between an AI and a 280 Remington?
Is that like Creedmoor it?
Sort of, yeah. So it's a shoulder profile change and a neck length change and a body taper change. So, instead of having a taper to the cartridge, it's popped out almost straight. And instead of having like a gentle slope to the shoulder, it's popped out much sharper.
Yeah, see, what do these things have to do with anything, though?
Case volume.
How does that... It's only case volume.
Yep.
Why does somebody even make... So when you have something like this where you say that somebody took it and they bumped it out a little bit for case volume, they made it a less gradual slope of the neck and made it a little bit more severe, if you will, so that you could get more powder in there, more case volume. Why didn't everybody just do that from the beginning?
Well, it's a good question.
Why
I think it came down.
Taper it in the beginning?
So if we look at like modern cartridge design,
good question.
And we'll go way back. We'll go circa 1873. We'll go to the 4570.
Okay, yeah.
So
straight wall, right?
Straight wall.
Yeah, just like a
black
tube of
powder.
lipstick.
We're filling it up and we're stuffing a bullet into it. And we start getting into some shouldered cartridges, and we can go back to some of the British, like the Snyders and things like this. But we'll go to the 3030, so 1894. Now we're using a different type of powder, and we're getting velocity out of a larger case volume and a smaller bullet diameter. And that kind of gentle, gradual slope and shoulder angle to control headspace as opposed to a rim, and maybe the 3030 is not a great example for that, but that style of cartridge design was in the fashion.
So they were getting their tapers and their necks and stuff because the bullets were getting smaller.
Smaller bullets, larger cases, existent cases.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is how we're achieving velocity with smokeless powders.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, we got some like 300 H&H. If you want to see a cartridge that looks very out of place on a modern landscape, look at a 300 H&H.
I'm looking it up right now.
So long tapered case. Belt on it. I mean, it's got a lot of things going against it. It's a fabulous cartridge. It's really on paper not much better than a 06.
Oh, that's a weird looking thing. It looks like the Washington Monument.
Yep. It's a goofy cartridge. Won Wimbledon several times. Amazing long-range gun.
What's that 165 thing Ian brought in one time that shot a cartridge similar to that, where it was this real long, like,
so that was a German
looking
like
thing.
a 6.5 by I can't remember exactly metric designation German cartridge, but in any event,
I'm interrupting you left and right because I have so many questions. Sorry.
Yeah, so the cartridge design thing, I think it was just because that was what we knew at the time. Like that was the way to do it. Why did radial engines get replaced by different designs, and why are boxer motors not as widely accepted as like an inline or a V-shaped motor? And maybe that's
a great question.
Maybe that's not going to be the thing in a couple of years. Maybe we're going to have an X. Who knows?
Well, that would be really interesting,
wouldn't it? But that would be like a kind of a transgression almost back to a radial, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it...
back to the old engines that would go...
Yeah. you had to wind them. And I really think, though, like the case design input was just a function of that was what we were doing at the time. And so when P.O. Ackley came around and looked at what was available, especially on like an .6 or a Roberts case or a Mauser case or whatever he was toying with at the time, it made sense to him. Hey, let's straighten that taper and pop that shoulder. We can gain 5% more powder in there. And while that sounds like an insignificant amount, if you look at, say, a 260 versus a 260 Ackley, there's a difference there. It's pretty notable. And if you look at, say, a 6.5 by 55 Swedish Mauser and a 6.5 Swedish Mauser Ackley, which is also, I think, called a 6.5 Heartthrob or something like that, that's a monster case. I mean, that does a lot in a little package.
Just
like over, like we're talking hundreds of feet per second difference?
100 to 150.
100 to 150?
Well, maybe like 50 to 125. I'd have to run the numbers. But look at the WISM versus the Win Mag.
Yeah.
Modernized case. We got shorter, we got wider, we got fatter, we got stronger. The case is literally heavier to help with pressure, to allow you to drive upwards of 60,000, 65,000 PSI, and push your bullet faster with a smaller amount of powder. And it's modern case design. So the question is, like, are we going to be looking at this cartridge in a few years and being like, look at how big it was, and we're going to be shooting something that is going to be...
The thing is huge.
Yeah. Looking at something that's going to be a lot shorter and a lot fatter? I don't know. It's hard to say. The short, fat revolution kind of went away quicker than I thought it would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we went into more sensibly designed cases. Like, remember the super short mags?
Yeah, maybe.
So there was WISM, WSM.
And then there was the WSSM.
Yep, correct. And so those are like comical. Like you hold them in your hand, you're like, look at you chubby little critter. You can only fit 3 of them in a magazine, and they fed terribly out of a lot of guns. And so, we're working...
Oh, that thing looks like an Oompa Loompa.
Yeah, so we're working within the constraints of what a cartridge is capable of doing, not only from like a ballistic standpoint, but also from a mechanical standpoint. Can I feed this thing out of a magazine?
Right.
And so that's why we kind of gravitate...
Magazines are huge.
Yeah. This is why we kind of gravitate back to this design or these dimensions, that fairly limited, if not eliminated, body taper, the shoulder angle, the neck length, and the bolt face. And I think that's why these cartridges, and those similar to it, like the 260, are going to be indoctrinated into that Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Magazines remind me of like the rings. Rings to scopes are like magazines to ammunition and rifles.
Big limiting factor.
They're the big limiting factor, and then the thing that everybody forgets about and tries to get the cheap version of. But when you think about it, it's the whole reason the dang thing runs, and the cartridge is designed around the magazines. The magazines are, I mean, it's like, it's huge.
Yes.
You can't chintz out on that.
No.
Shouldn't.
No.
So back on track, maybe, if we will, the 6.5 revolution, is it here to stay? I think that depends on the attention span of the shooters in America, especially. I think in like I said, the Scandinavian and Nordic countries and in Europe, 6.5 is very popular and has been for a very long time.
Yeah.
Swedish Mauser is older than really any vehicle driving on the road today, and powered flight. And it's still very, very, very popular. If you go on to some of the ammunition manufacturers in Europe, like Norma or RWS or Lapua, you still see that as like a mainstay. Like,
yeah.
Yep. Same thing with 8 Mauser. those things are going to stay there forever. In America, are we able to hold on to the attributes and the successes of the 6.5 long enough, or does something else come along and swing that pendulum?
I gotta say, I know my attention span is not a good one, so I've already kind of gotten a little bit kind of like 6.5
a little jaded to it.
Out.
Yep.
It's kind of like, well, yeah, you can find a 6.5 Creedmoor under a rock somewhere, which is crazy to say at this point because I still kind of remember when it was a little bit like, ooh,
little boutique.
Yeah. But like I got my my Browning BLR, I got that, and I got it in a 308. So I digressed back to a time when people were just front stuffing rifles and shooting at each other in a gigantic line, red versus blue.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about it, Jim, you can put anything down the barrel, nuts, bolts, screw, anything you have.
In a pinch.
It is pretty class. Yeah, it's and then I also got another little something that's new that I think Mark is really going to like. So, but I'm going to save that one for another podcast. We'll talk about it. I think it deserves its own
very interesting
sort of episode.
Very interesting.
But it ain't a 6.5 Creed, I'll tell you that much.
We can't cut this short yet. We still have time.
What else do we need to
I've got
talk?
a question.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
So it seems like I said, we keep going back to 6.5 Creed. That's your baseline, right?
Yep.
And we keep going bigger, stronger, faster. How fast can we get this bullet? How fast can we get this bullet?
Mm-hmm.
You get all the way up to like something like 6.5 300 or the 26 Nosler, or even the 6.5, the new 6.5 RPM, which seems like a really, really cool, sexy cartridge. But also, like with that, then you hear guys, well, barrel life, you're gonna shoot it out,
yes,
and maybe it's like that depends on the application, right?
Oh, correct. Yeah. So if you have a hunter that might shoot 2 boxes of ammunition a year, that individual has a lifetime rifle. If you have a shooter like a PRS shooter, and this is 2 very, very, very different things. I guess it's if you have a PRS shooter that's changing a barrel a season, it's not practical to go with a cartridge like a 26 Nosler, or it's not practical to go shoot long-range shooting competitions in which your round counts are into the hundreds, potentially with a cartridge like that. One, you're going to exhaust yourself from a financial standpoint because the ammunition is very expensive, and then 2, you will shorten the life of your gun usably. If that doesn't bother you, yeah, go for it. It's very flat. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about wind that much.
Is it the barrel and the what's the throat as well?
Part of it, yeah. This is all encompassing. So if we say we're burning a throat out, we're burning a barrel out.
Okay, same thing.
Yeah, correct.
Interchangeably.
Yes.
Okay.
So no, I'm not going to recommend somebody buys a Super Magnum 6.5 whatever to go shoot our Vortex Extreme match, just because how many hundreds of rounds are you looking to get out of your gun? Because it is a different and measurable thing. Like you can't expect. We just retired in March. I guess it's coming up on a year now. We retired one of our test rifles for the range certification program, chambered in 6.5.
Wait. Was it that old tan and green camo thing? Or
no, that one still shoots.
That thing is a hammer.
That thing weighs 10 tons, and it has been around Vortex since the dawn of creation.
We retired a Tikka T3 CTR. Not because it shot bad, but we went from reasonably expecting 0.3 of a minute of angle out of these guns to seeing about a 1/2 to 3/4 minute of angle. When you put the chronograph on it, we started seeing some spikes. And the question was, okay, could we strip it down to bare metal, kind of start over and see what it would do? Yeah, maybe. We figure we had between 5,500 and 5,700 rounds down that barrel.
Amazing.
Yep. Yeah. And it shot great. And we're tracking the next 2 that are in line. They're right around 2,700 right now, as the last time I checked, each one of them. Consistently, the guys are putting up 10th, 2/10, 3/10 minute groups with them. I don't think you're going to have that expectation if you have a cartridge like a 26 Nosler. But it wasn't designed to do that. This isn't a round that we're shooting high volume. Right?
It's a race engine.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a MotoGP bike.
Yeah, you take it out when it's time to take it out and kick some ass.
Yep.
And then you put it away when it's not your daily driver.
No, correct. And the expectation shouldn't be that it is, right? The expectation shouldn't be that your MotoGP bike is going to be the one that you cruise around all summer on.
Yeah.
You race it, it's thrashed after your race, and you rebuild it. But it's a good consideration, right? It's a very good point. If you're looking at a 6.5, what are you looking to do with it? Mm-hmm. Some cartridges are going to be very good at that thing that you're looking for and very good at or not very good at other things. Like if you want an uber flat shooting 6.5, you're not concerned about recoil and you're not concerned about barrel life because you're a hunter. A 6.5 300 Weatherby or a 26 Nosler is a great option. If you think you're going to spend as much time, possibly more time on the range, ringing steel and punching paper at distance, the 6.5 Creedmoor or a 260 or a 6.5 by 47 Lapua is a much better option. It will do both, maybe not to the degree of efficiency that, or I'm not going to use efficiency, but like to the degree of, what's the word I want? Like severity on game or lethality on game that a 26 Nosler or a 6.5 300 Weatherby will. So there's some give and take. Make your choice based on your application.
When, in your opinion, do you start to step away from kind of like that just shootability, just that easy shooting rifle? When you start, gravitating away from, like the 260, the 6.5 Creed.
Or do you ever step away from?
So I do.
Do you have some rifles where you're like, I hate shooting that thing, but I'll shoot it if I have to?
Absolutely. 300 Weatherby. I've got an ultralight in 300 Weatherby, and I hate shooting that rifle. But it is like lightning. It's a difficult rifle to shoot. I don't shoot it half as good as I shoot my 6.5 hunting rifles. But I shoot it good enough that, like, to the ranges that I will ethically engage a game animal, it gets the job done quite well.
I feel like what you're doing is you're taking away some accuracy, likely, a little bit of a flinch, comfort, in order to just make something dead. Whereas if you were shooting something more accurately, like you said earlier, accuracy improves your efficacy on big game. Can.
There's a couple limiting factors like bullet construction, and Mark and I have firsthand run into bullet construction issues before.
Explain.
So the bullet construction thing is a huge one for me because I believe that a lot of people will glom onto a cartridge or even a caliber designation. I'm going to pick on 6.5 because this has happened to me on a number of occasions with this cartridge. And this is not taking away from any manufacturer or anything like this. This was my, I guess, getting bewildered or starry-eyed over my ability to shoot a cartridge real well. And then I guess my expectation on how a bullet performs when it goes through a creature. So shooting these new high BC, because again, we get enamored and starstruck by that term, that BC. Folks are buying bullets off of shelves simply based on their BC values.
Yes.
Or they're arguing over the effectiveness of a cartridge based on the BC value. And that is an important factor, but it and this is my opinion, I don't think it's as important a factor as bullet construction. Things I will not do.
No, we're talking hunting.
Yes. Yeah, and I hunt way more than I'm a PRS shooter. I'm not a PRS shooter. That's not my thing.
Right.
I don't want to shoot a bullet designed for exceptionally smooth transitioning through air currents for impact on steel to hear a ping. I want to shoot a bullet that is designed to go through a front shoulder and then the ribs behind it and then go through the soft tissue and then go through the other set of ribs behind it, and then go through the other off shoulder. Like, to me, that is a successful hunting bullet. That is what I'm after. I want to destroy bone structure. So, one, I have as diminished a time frame in which that animal goes from dead to alive, or alive to dead. I want it, like so.
Yeah.
And then, two, one that's going to prevent me from having to call in the hounds and try to find a game animal that maybe I got a flap injury on. And if we go back and it was the reloading podcast or the start of the reloading podcast in which we talked about how we got into reloading. I got into reloading because of a 243 and a poorly selected bullet. Not a poor bullet, but a poorly selected bullet. And I shot a doe whitetail with a 243 and a bullet that was not frangible, but designed to fragment extremely quickly. It was designed for like predators and varmint hunting. And that was a massive oversight on my behalf. It has nothing to do with the bullet manufacturer. More or less what happened, the bullet hit, and I'll call it a flap injury, kind of detonated on the shoulder of the animal. If I would have been like 3 inches back of that shoulder, I think that thing would have folded like a $5 tent. But I shoot shoulders because they can't run if they don't have running gear. And there's a lot to be said for that, breaking down the skeletal structure of an animal as well as taking out its pumper. And
well, I think it's also important to remember you're not always getting a broadside shot.
Nope.
You might have a quartering to shot. You might have a quartering away shot. But either way, I think we probably share the same opinion.
Yeah.
But you want that bullet to be able to drive through.
Through.
Yeah,
and
okay.
through.
And not hit and end up somewhere squishy where it should have been somewhere hard, or vice versa. And so I've had, with the 6.5 Creedmoor, jacket separations from core. And I've had very poor penetration because of those shot angles. And then on heavier animals, at relatively close distances, and again, this is taking for granted my ability to shoot well, and then possibly not matching my bullet construction to my expectation. I had a 6.5 Creedmoor impact on a mule deer that I did not hit bone on the way in nor on the way out. The bullet did not penetrate any deeper than the muscle tissue on the off shoulder. So I didn't even make it to the hide. It was a very large deer, but I also didn't touch bone, and the bullet only weighed about 35 to 40% of what it did when it started. Now, the animal's dead, so is the question, was that a bullet failure? I don't know. I also didn't have any blood. If it was a little further back, did where do you start drawing the lines of, well, that was a success or that was a failure? Had I been shooting a better constructed bullet in that same caliber, and had I hit bone, it would have been a moot point. I would have broken the shoulders, and the thing would have tipped over, and that would have been it. I'd have been pleased as punch. But bullet construction is a big thing. A lot of these high BC bullets are designed to fly very well over long distances, but they give up something on the short end, and that's the ability to control the rate of expansion and have weight retention.
Now, on a flip side, though, you can have that bullet go in, and maybe it comes apart, to some degree or some level, and it dumps all its energy, and the animal collapses.
Potentially. When two bighorn sheep smack their heads together, how much energy is focused on that small point on their skull, just above their brain?
Oh, it's like
Lots.
It's like the amount of energy of like 10 Mack trucks hitting the building.
Do they explode and die?
No, but
No,
they have
they
really
go
special,
back at
cool
it.
skulls.
Right. But they stay alive, right? So, by the energy theory, they should just burst or should fly backwards or should fold or drop, right?
Sure.
Okay. And you shot a deer with your bow the other day. How many foot-pounds of energy did that arrow have?
I don't know, 50,
Right.
53.
Tops.
Oh, no, I always make the argument
Right.
because I look at these energy numbers and I say, but we do kill things with arrows.
So I guess
Now they kill in a different way.
they do. It's all by hypoxia and blood loss and that kind of thing. We're starving the brain of oxygen due to the fact that it doesn't have blood to deliver that oxygen. But there's also the other factor with bullets, like shocking the central nervous system or destroying bone structure, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So I guess on my tangent there, a lot of these bullets in a lot of these 6.5s have to cater to the fact that people have the expectation that this is a long-range cartridge, so we need a long-range bullet that's designed to fly very aerodynamically. And
they need to cater. I think you said it. I'm trying to keep up. They need to cater to people's expectations.
Yes. The tricky part is a lot of these bullets lack integrity at close range. I would say for myself, the range in which I'm engaging animals more often than not.
0 to 300.
Correct. And so if we're shooting a pretty heavy critter, we'll just say elk and moose, and I know people who have shot match bullets, quote match bullets, at elk and crunched them, folded them, dead. So I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying it would be my first choice because like you said, Mark, when we get into tricky angles, when we get into bone structure, when we get into heavy hide, you killed a moose last year. They are thick with 2Cs, man.
Larger mammals.
Yes. Is a bullet designed with a light jacket, not made to penetrate heavy bone and hide, the best choice for that application? In my opinion, it is not. However, that bullet flies really well through the air, allows you to deliver payload on target. Actually works better in controlling its rate of expansion at long range than it does.
Range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is a whole
Is
other
that because at longer range, it's not delivering as much power, which would then go into just completely obliterating it?
Correct.
So actually, by going slower,
Mm-hmm.
it keeps itself together better than when it's going just zerpity-zerp fast, and then it just kind of hits something. And
Yep. So the trade-off is you shoot a heavily constructed bullet that requires a large amount of velocity to initiate mechanical expansion, allowing you to break bones and pass through the other side of the animal.
that's what you use when you're going to be shooting something closer up,
The theory, yeah.
in theory.
Yep. Versus a bullet that does the opposite of that at short range, but does it at the long range. Well, are we hunting long range or are we hunting short range? I don't know how to make that determination.
Well, in case in point, when I was hunting blacktails back home, right, I was anticipating shots anywhere from 20 yards to potentially 600 yards, right? That was kind of, I guess, my comfort zone as far as and 6 would definitely be on the outside of what I want. They're not big deer, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I guess, I was having a mental tug of war.
Yep.
Of what bullet do I want to shoot?
I think the answer, shoot them with a 45 caliber muzzleloader.
Seen it done.
You make a good point.
That was a very dead deer. Now, Mark, on that deer, was there a question mark when you were starting to cut the thing apart as to how bullets traverse the body cavity?
Yes.
Yep. And that's a real thing. And so with the 6.5 Revolution, speaking to it, we want these slippery bullets because they shoot good far and they're nice to shoot. We got to take into consideration bullet construction when applying it to a game animal because it's a different thing. I'll go out and shoot steel. I shoot steel at 400 meters with my 22.
Sure. Who cares?
I wouldn't shoot a rabbit at 300 meters with my 22 because I think it's unethical.
Yeah.
I might hit it. I might even hit it in the grape, and then I've got a dead rabbit for the pot. But I'm not going to do that because now we're talking about killing something. This is the only thing about the 6.5 thing that I'm a little worried about is bullet construction or available projectile styles, and then the expectation because of what this series of cartridges is capable of long range.
What's your favorite 6.5 bullet to go out and hunt with?
127 grain Barnes LRX.
It's so interesting that you'd say a lighter weight bullet.
But it's longer, and it's made out of solid copper.
Okay.
I have not killed anything with the Hornady GMX, which follows along the same lines. Homogeneous bullet design, so solid alloy.
No jacket?
Nope, it's one piece of metal. My hunting partner has killed stuff with the GMX, and much with my experience with the Barnes bullets, it is like lightning. And for taking a quartering away or quartering on, or what I don't know, you call it a structural shot on a game animal, a homogeneous bullet design will always be the best choice because you will get the best penetration. The balance, though, is you will get outside of that, or you can get outside of the range in which that bullet can reliably mechanically expand. That's where a lighter constructed bullet like a Hornady ELDX pulls away because it can do that at a lower velocity.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't shot anything at extreme distance or really at too great of distance with those GMXs, but I've got the 165s in my 300 short, and it has been quite handy, like a death ray.
I have to look back at the number of critters it has, but I finally recovered my first Barnes TTSX from a game animal, and I'm like 20 to 25 critters deep in the Barnes design. Finally recovered one, and he was bedded facing me, and I hit ribs. I hit like 3 ribs on the way in, kind of a raking shot. I hit the spine twice, and I recovered it in between, like where the spinal cord would run down the vertebral column, inside of a vertebrae, like nestled in there, in between his hips. So I punched him just in front of the shoulder. And it ended up there. And it lost exactly 1 grain of weight. 1 grain of weight.
Wow.
Yep.
Which, is that within the threshold of variance when it just came
I know the
out?
plastic tips on those bullets weigh about a grain. So
Fair
wow.
enough.
So with that being said,
can I ask this?
Yeah.
So you said it's a 127.
Out of the 6.5s, 127 LRX.
What is your velocity on that?
So like and this goes back to why we make bigger cases too. This is a good tie-in. Differing opinions from different people. 1,600 feet per second is the line to draw.
What do you mean?
So after 1,600 feet per second on a heavily constructed bullet like that, that's where you start getting wonky, potentially with expansion.
So you actually... Wait, so what is the velocity you're getting out of that bullet then?
At the muzzle.
We'll just say $3,000.
Really?
29 and change.
So it's moving quick. And, you're saying once it dips below 1,600, that's where it starts losing some of its efficacy.
Where do you start at what yardage are you dipping below that 1,600 threshold?
I'd have to look at the paperwork, which I have.
Got it on a cellular.
Here. Which you have
This is very interesting. This is something that
computer.
This is something I got to admit that I haven't thought of much before, but you go into the ammo section at a store and you just look at the shelves, and I just, a lot of people, they just look for the box that's got a deer face on it.
Yep.
And you just think, that's what I want to kill. It's kind of actually weird when you think about it. What do I want to kill? Oh, yeah, there's this picture on this box. Anyway, but you think that, and you just go, okay, cool. I guess they say it kills deer, so it must kill deer. I've never looked at what it's made out of or how it's constructed. I got to be very honest. And I don't think I'm the only one. I know that probably sounds like, I guess, to be honest, I guess I haven't done, a ton of hunting. And when I have, probably, I think a lot of times I'm borrowing a rifle. And, so you don't really know. But it is important to consider that. That is ultimately the thing that is going to be punching whatever it is that you're going to be putting down. So you should think about how it's constructed.
Mm-hmm. Right. So about 600 to 700 yards, depending on the elevation.
Fantastic.
Right.
So you're well within.
But like that 1,600 foot per second threshold you're like flirting with disaster. I know people personally that have taken critters way farther than that and recovered the bullets, and they look exactly like they do in the magazines. You pull them out, they're like, wow, that is quintessential performance. So I'm not going to shoot that far. So that's why I'm very happy with that projectile design.
It's got to be pretty flat, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, relatively. It's not as flat as a super slippery bullet, but...
What do you know off the top of your head what the BC is on that bullet?
So let me run it for the 308 here real quick. I know this is a 6.5 talk, but this is easy for me to do. BC is very low at .350.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And then there's a point where BC can be overcome by velocity, right?
Right.
So we can get a hit on target with less adjustment because we've upped the velocity.
That's like Mark when he just asked, hey, did you try forcing it?
Step one.
Holy crap.
I can't get this bolt off. Did you use the impact yet?
So this goes back to why do we go with a larger case and a 6.5 projectile? Well, maybe we want to shoot a bullet with a particular characteristic, like let's say the Hornady GMX or the Barnes LRX, or even Nosler's AccuBond, which is not a homogeneous design. They got a bullet called an E-tip, that is, to extend the effective range of that bullet. Yeah. And that's a big consideration for me.
It's making sense now.
It's a huge consideration for me.
It actually makes sense now.
Yeah, usually I'm like this swirling mass of
twirly
nonsense.
gumdrops.
But yeah, that's why.
Interesting. Now I get, okay, huh. Well, I wish I knew how to sum it up, but you just summed it up, so I probably don't need to say anything else. But it's like bullet selection can determine also which cartridge you find yourself using.
Yep. I don't think if you look at all the cartridges on this list that we have, or you crack open your favorite reloading manual, or you Google available 6.5 millimeter cartridges, I don't think there's a bad one on there for really anything, so long as you're matching the application appropriately.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we can take a 50 BMG case and neck it down to 6.5 Creedmoor, I don't think that's a good idea for a number of reasons. But that's not what we're dealing with here.
Don't tell me what to do.
Right. Well, okay.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a bad one on there, but really look at what you're trying to do.
Well, yeah. You should make the 50 Creedmoor. Hasn't been done.
It fires a loaded 6.5 projectile.
We'll be kings.
I don't know. Barrett necked down the 50 to 416. They shortened the case up too, so it was a 400 grain high BC solid at 3,000 feet per second that stayed supersonic to just shy of 3,000 yards.
My goodness.
Yeah.
That's for putting holes in Toyota engine blocks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
At far away.
Hey, really far away Toyota engine blocks. Wow.
Yeah, so
There's a lot.
maybe we'll sum it up. I'm gonna.
Yeah, sum it on up.
Should I put you on the spot?
Please.
Outside of the 6.5 Creed, pick a 6.5.
On this list or 865?
Oh, any.
Any.
Yeah, any.
Okay. So I'm going to say that this is for mule deer on down. Because
Can you,
I like
can
that.
you explain what's up from mule deer, for example? Elk and moose?
elk and moose,
Caribou?
caribou.
I would almost put
Bison?
caribou in the mule deer family, other than the fact that you're generally hunting them in grizzly country.
Man, that's one of the big caveats. If I'm flying with my rifle and my ammunition and my pocketbook, if I'm going on a hunt that's going to cost me personally that much money, and for some folks, that might not be a big deal. If this is a hunt that you can do, shoot the rifle that you're comfortable with. Heck yeah, brother. For me, if I can find an insurance policy in anything I do, and I know that it's silly to say that cartridge ensures me success, because it doesn't necessarily. The last thing I want to do is show up to the tundra undergunned for the cost of the whole thing, plus things with teeth that eat people.
Oh, exactly.
Not that you can't kill a bear with a 6.5 Creedmoor, because I bet you can, and I bet people have. I'd like something with a little more weight and a little more horsepower behind it that would allow me to, say, break 2 front shoulders or punch through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I got him off topic. Sorry, Mark.
Okay.
Well, no, that's good.
What was the question, James?
Mule deer on down.
Oh, mule deer on down. Yeah, so
Mark
above.
wanted to know what 6.5 you would choose.
Yeah, so I don't hunt elks. I probably will someday. It's not big on my list of things to do.
I think it's just that you haven't or
Yeah.
chosen not to.
I'm not going to hunt elk with a 6.5 Creedmoor personally for a number of reasons. I'm not going to.
Bazillions of people do it.
They do. I'm not
We
going to
know-
hunt elk.
Didn't Ian shoot an elk at just some ungodly distance with a 6.5 Creedmoor?
I don't know. I think he shot it with a 28.
I think that was a 28 nozzler.
Oh, it was
yeah.
like 28 hours. Like, you're right.
Sam killed a big bull at like
a long ways.
Long
Many
ways.
yards, yeah.
Yep. Now I'm not going to do that for a number of reasons.
Right.
And those reasons are unique to me. One of the biggest ones is I don't think that the bullets available at the velocities I can push them are the right choice.
mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go up to a 7 or a 30 or a 33.
Wait, but
Mhm.
we told you have to pick a 6.5.
Oh, off of this list.
No, just
No,
any,
just in
any
general,
6.5
like-
ever.
for deer-sized game.
Okay, I have 2.5 answers.
Okay. This is like asking me to pick a car. It's easy to get
Oh.
distracted.
If I was to have any 6.5 cartridge in the world and the rifle to go along with it,
Ever made. It doesn't
Ever
even have to be
made.
made anymore.
it is a 1903 Mannlicher Schoenauer carbine. It may
I've
be.
heard you say that before.
It may be the absolute sexiest, finest, most beautiful, eloquent, elegant gun ever built. And it was made famous by an elephant hunter. So how's that for an interesting juxtaposition? WMD Bell. They called him Karamoja Bell. Killed more elephants with that than anything. Eventually got stomped out by an elephant, switched to something slightly larger, went to a 7 Mauser and a 303 Brit.
Getting stomped out will do that.
Yep.
Yeesh.
But he killed a lot of pachyderms with a 156 grain round nose bullet fired from a 6.5 by 54 Mannlicher Schoenauer.
Okay.
Yep. So
There's
that
one
one.
of 2.5.
The other is a 6.5/6 Ackley or the new 6.5 Weatherby RPM. Now, I have not seen load data for the RPM from a shooter outside of Weatherby.
Mm-hmm.
I have not held it in my hands, and I can't validate the claims. And the 6.506 AI, I have. But I own a 280 AI, and it does things that the 6.506 AI doesn't. But the 6.506 AI does things that the 280 AI doesn't. So it's like we're in this matrix right now between these two rounds.
And I think what you've just accurately done is explain why we have 17 million cartridges, because we're just trying to find the ones that do the things that the other ones don't, but then they do
The
less
things that the other
or
ones
more.
didn't.
And yeah.
Then yeah.
Audio readers of this podcast, I assure you by this time next year, I will own one, if not two, of those 6.5 cartridges aforementioned.
Okay. What's the half?
Because I don't know whether it's going to be the 6.5.
Oh, that's
Odd
why there's
6 or the
2.5.
6.5
Okay, I
RPM.
get it. I get it. There's not
Yeah.
an additional one. That's just kind of a half. Meh.
Oh.
All right.
I got one more question.
Yes.
Ugh, everybody hates me right now.
No.
When I was talking about velocities before, right, and kind of burning out a barrel, at what point with these 6.5 bullets do you kind of hit that threshold of like, okay, this is going to be shootable. I can shoot it as much as, relatively speaking, as much as I want, whenever I want. And then you go into something like, hey, this is just a super high-speed bitch cat, and I'm using it for this, and
What
it's...
did he call it?
What?
I don't know if that needs a beep or not.
No, I think we can actually keep... But explain what a bitch cat is.
just like super fast.
Row, row, row. Bitch
Wow.
cat. Anybody
You know,
ever hunted a bitch cat?
But like I guess comparing like a 6.5 300 versus like a 6.5 Creed, right? Like
At what point have you gone from the daily driver to the race engine?
yes.
I am not a metallurgist, so I can't speak to the resiliency of modern barrel steel with the various treatments that are in there. But I think it's a 140 grain bullet so the bearing surfaces that you would encounter on a lot of commonly placed 140 grain bullets at about 3,100 feet per second.
Okay.
As we get over that,
It's bitch cat.
it's bitch cat.
All right.
I'm so glad you said that.
Can we make stickers?
We need
6.5
shirts.
6.5 bitch cat.
We
Making a
need shirts.
cartridge.
One shirt is going to say, "You can't catch bass like this," with a picture of a goose flying across it. Quote from Eric. Thank you, Eric. You can't catch bass like geese. And
No,
the
you
other
can't.
one's
That
gonna
is a
be-
true statement,
that's-
yes.
That is 100% true. And the other is going to be bitch cat with a picture of a 6.5 Creedmoor on it or something.
Something. Well, there you have it, folks.
Boom. Ryan, any last final closing thoughts before we sign off?
I think that, ladies and gentlemen listening to this podcast, if you're looking for a cartridge that you can shoot a lot of for not a lot of money, it's still the 6.5 Creedmoor. I think it's going to be for a very long time.
Yeah.
We delved into a little bit of reloading adventures. James, you said, you know what, I probably wouldn't do it again.
No.
And I think this is an example of a cartridge that you couldn't have picked a better cartridge to never reload.
What?
The 6.5 Creedmoor.
Oh, I get it, because you can get it so easily from the factory and good ammo.
I think for you guys and gals out there shooting mule deers, antelopes, and western whitetails, anything with a 6.5 in front of it is going to be a great choice. Consider bullet construction when we talk about the ethical taking of game.
Bam.
Said it. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Tell us what you think about the 6.5 Revolution. Hit us up on Instagram. Tell us what you think about Bitch Cat. And we'll see you next time. Whew, that was a good 101. Stay tuned for 102, I guess. All right.
Have a great day, everybody.
See
Bye.
ya.
Bye.
Bitch cat. Bitch cat.
That's my
Mark, I want you to draw up a cartridge. I don't care what it even looks like.
the 6.5 bitch cat.
6.5 bitch cat.
It's going to look something like Eric's drawing here. I just got a picture of.
He did good. Just right, proud of you.
Oh,
The bitch cat. Wow. All right. The bitch cat. When you get your bitch cat out, when you open the box, like those e-cards, that you can send people, you open them, it says something. You know what I mean? You open it up.
Yeah. Like the little hoops and yo-yo guys.
You're a bitch, girl. Yeah, that's what you get. The Hall & Oates.
What I wish I had a 6.5 PR, 6.5 RPM to compare the action on a 6.5 RPM.
Same length as yours.
Okay.
But that's unique to Weatherby and Tika because your Mark V is the same length whether it's a 30-06 or whether it's a 6.5 Creedmoor.
Which is just a standard length action.
They call it a standard.
Okay.
So it's going to be slightly longer
I
than
have to pee badly.
slightly longer than that. So
Brian,
that
thank
case-
you very much.
Yeah, that was a good one. Thanks,
It
James.
was an excellent one.
I liked it.
That
Yes.
that 6.5 RPM will be about to where my fingernail is.
That's where the case will go till. 2.
Yeah. So it's just shorter than a 30-06. That cartridge is to the 6.5-06 AI as the 6.5 Creedmoor is to the 260 Remington. It's a more efficient case design.
The RPM is.
I would jump all over it, except it's been released now for 3 months, and I don't know a single person who has one. I can't even read about it, except for gun rags. I know Adam has killed a lot of stuff with it.
I'm fearful it will, and I hope this is not the case. I'm fearful it'll be one of those cartridges that should have caught on.
Yep. I'll say this, though.
But I'm very surprised that it hasn't, was one of those.
They have come out with a package in the new Mark Vs that is going to help it tremendously.
The back tube.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.